He sat on the same bench for 25 years, same place, same hour, every single Saturday, not to grieve, but to wait. Until one day, a street musician started singing a lullaby that no one else could have known. And in that moment, he knew. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you believe a song could carry the truth someone's been hiding for decades? He sat on the same bench every Saturday just off the corner of King Street and Calhoun, across from the iron gates of Marion Square. Richard Callahan. People passed him like wind slips through branches, fast, detached, unaware. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't old enough to draw sympathy, nor young enough to draw curiosity, just invisible. And he preferred it that way. The world had moved on, and so had the case, but he hadn't. Charleston had changed a lot since 1999. New restaurants, new street names. Even the paint on the park benches had been replaced. But that patch of brick sidewalk, cracked in the shape of a lightning bolt under his feet, remained untouched. So did the question, where did she go? Every Saturday he watched the plaza from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. He rarely moved, only once at 3:12 p.m. He'd walk across the street, buy a single black coffee from Eli's table, and return, always the same spot, always facing east. Because that's where she vanished. 25 years ago, right there at the edge of the square, his daughter disappeared while walking ahead of her mother toward a balloon vendor. The street had been busy, sunny, ordinary. No scream, no snatch, just gone. The balloon man had nothing to say. No security cameras had caught anything. No one reported seeing a girl being led away or carried. She was just missing. The headlines had called it the Charleston Vanish. A 5-year-old girl, blue dress, red shoes, last seen holding a quarter in her hand, gone in plain daylight. Richard had read every article, every theory. There were no signs of struggle, no ransom notes, no witnesses, and most damning of all, no body. The detail no one knew, what Richard never told anyone, not even Laura, was that just seconds before she vanished, their daughter turned to him and said something strange. They'd been walking behind her. The girl had skipped ahead near the balloon stand. Then she turned, looked back at her father, and said, "Daddy, do you hear the music?" That single sentence haunted him more than the disappearance itself. It didn't make sense. There was no music, no one playing anything. No music store nearby, just the bustle of Saturday Charleston, full of tourists and kids and bells from the cathedral down the street. "Do you hear the music?" He didn't. But maybe someone else did. Most people thought Richard stayed in Charleston out of stubbornness or grief. But the truth was simpler. He'd promised. The night their daughter disappeared, after the cops left and Laura cried herself into sleep, Richard stayed in her bedroom. He sat in the tiny wooden chair by her dresser, held her stuffed rabbit in one hand, and made a promise aloud to the silence. "I will never leave the city until I find you." It had been 25 years. He never left, not even once. His apartment was a few blocks away, above a bookstore, dusty and cramped, but quiet. He worked part-time at the local library, cataloging old newspapers and digitizing archives. Every spare hour went into the case. He had a wall at home, not quite like in the movies, no red string. Just photocopies of every newspaper clipping, copies of police interviews, maps, and one blurry photo. His daughter smiling on a carousel horse the week before she vanished. He didn't know why he kept staring at it. He had memorized every inch of her face, but it made the silence feel less permanent. On March 23rd, a Saturday like all outros, something broke the cycle. 3:07 p.m. A sound drifted through the plaza, unusual, unexpected. Music, not just any music, a melody. Soft, raw, unpolished, but unmistakably familiar. Richard froze mid-sip of his coffee. He didn't even notice the cup tilt, spilling hot liquid onto his trousers. He stood slowly, turned. Across the street, under the shadow of a Spanish moss-draped oak, sat a young man, black jeans, boots, and a brown acoustic guitar balanced on his knee. The melody was coming from him. And Richard's heart dropped, because that wasn't just any tune, that was the lullaby. The one he used to sing to her every night, the one he made up himself, the one that had never been recorded, written, or shared with another soul. His feet moved before his brain could catch up. He crossed the street. Crowds blurred, time warped, every step shook, and then he was standing in front of the young man. The boy looked up, maybe 27, messy hair, calm eyes. He kept playing, unaware of the quake he had caused. The words spilled gently from his lips, barely above a whisper. In a sky made of silver and stars that don't fall, close your eyes, little one. Daddy sees it all. Richard choked. He hadn't heard that song in 25 years. He'd written it for her, only ever sang it in her room, late at night, only once outside the house, at a recital in kindergarten. He blinked, then asked quietly, "Where did you learn that?" The boy stopped playing, startled. "What? Where did you hear it?" The musician tilted his head. "Oh, I don't know." "I've just always known it," Richard's voice trembled. "No, you haven't. I wrote that song up for my daughter. No one else knew it, not even her mother." The air shifted. Even the trees seemed to hush. The boy blinked slowly. "I think my sister used to sing it." That's when Richard's knees buckled. He didn't faint. He sat clumsily on the curb, fingers digging into his knees, heart sprinting. His sister. The boy didn't press. He sat silently, watching the older man fall apart. After a long pause, Richard looked back up. "What's your name?" The musician scratched the back of his neck. "Miles. Miles Morgan." Morgan. Richard froze. He remembered that name. From somewhere, a report, a list, a babysitter, something. He needed to go home. He needed the wall. Miles stared at him, slightly unnerved. "You okay, man?" Richard stood. "No, I'm not, but I think I'm about to be." That night, the wall came alive. He found it. A report dated August 12th, 1999. A woman named Celeste Morgan had been questioned as part of a neighborhood search. She had been a live-in nanny for a family 2 blocks from the park. She said she saw nothing unusual. But there was a note scribbled in pencil on the side. "No kids of her own. Single. Sister passed away in 1996. Raising nephew. M.M. 3 hours old. M.M. Miles Morgan." The rain tapped softly on the windows. Richard stared at the name. Celeste Morgan. The woman had raised a boy. And taught him a song that she could have only learned from one source, which meant she found her, took her, raised her. And now, somewhere out there, his daughter was alive. Richard hadn't cried at the funeral because there wasn't one, just a memorial service, a table with framed photos, an empty white coffin, and a pastor who said, "She's with the angels now?" But Richard didn't believe that. He didn't believe in angels, not after what happened. The day after Miles sang the lullaby, Richard didn't go to the library. He didn't sit on the bench. He didn't even make coffee. He just sat in his apartment, the rain dripping slowly against the window, reading and rereading that name, Celeste Morgan. He hadn't spoken to Laura in 7 years, not since the final appeal was denied. They'd divorced quietly, without blame. They'd simply run out of air. She moved to Savannah, remarried, had another child. Richard never did. He didn't blame her. She needed to rebuild. He couldn't, because rebuilding meant accepting that their daughter was gone. And Richard refused to build a life on that foundation. He kept her bedroom intact for nearly a decade. Same sheets, same wallpaper, same bookshelf with a half-torn Clifford, the big red dog cover. Eventually, water damage and mold forced him to box it all. But the boxes stayed, each one labeled Claire Evelyn Callahan. At first, people tried to comfort him. Friends, colleagues, even the police. They told him she had likely been taken, that it would be fast, that she didn't suffer, that the odds were slim, but maybe, just maybe, one day there'd be a knock at the door. No one says that after 5 or 10. After 25, people don't speak her name at all, but Richard did, every night, in prayer, in silence, in every She was the background music of his life. He remembered the last morning vividly. She had refused to wear the blue dress. She wanted the yellow one, the one with the butterflies. Laura said no. It was too cold. Claire pouted, folded her arms, and said, "Butterflies don't get cold." That was her logic, and it had made Richard laugh. That morning, he didn't know that laugh would be the last. By noon that day, the park was full. Laura was pushing Claire on the swing. Richard had bought lemon ice for them. He remembered the taste, too tart, too cold. He remembered her voice behind him. "Daddy, can I get a balloon?" He turned, saw her pointing. Red, always red. He nodded. She ran. Laura followed. He stayed to throw away the trash. When he turned back, she was gone. Laura thought she was hiding behind the cart. He thought she was on the other side. They circled the vendor once, twice. Then panic bloomed. He would never forget that hour. The way time melted, the sickening twist in his gut, the screams of Laura, the crowd's confusion. The first police cruiser, the first time he said the words, "Our daughter is missing." In the days that followed, everything slowed. Detectives, volunteers, TV interviews, canvassing, search dogs, nothing. And then the inevitable storm of blame. You weren't watching her. No, you weren't. She was right in front of you. She ran ahead. You said yes. No, you said yes. Every marriage has cracks. Theirs became chasms. Richard started sleeping in the guest room. Laura stopped going to work. They both stopped talking. What do you say to someone who lost the same thing you did, but in a completely different way? She mourned by closing her heart. He mourned by opening the door wider every day, just in case Claire. And now, 25 years later, he sat with a name in his hand, Miles Morgan. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to call the police. They'd ask for proof. He had none. He didn't want to scare the boy. He needed answers. So the next day he returned. Miles was there again, same bench, same guitar. Richard approached slowly. "Hey." Up. "Oh, you again? You okay?" Richard sat beside him. "I have a question. One more." Miles nodded cautiously. "That song, did your sister teach it to you?" Miles scratched his head. "Sorta. My mom used to hum it. She passed when I was a kid. But my sister, Abby, she sang it when we were little. Used to rock me to sleep." Richard's breath caught. "Abby." "Yeah." "Her full name?" Miles shrugged. "Abigail Morgan. But I think her middle name's Evelyn. Why?" "Evelyn. Claire Evelyn Callahan." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He found Miles's Instagram. There was a video, a girl's voice singing the lullaby in harmony, just a clip, not tagged. But he knew. He knew that voice. He knew that tone, even after 25 years. He hit pause. The face was blurred in the background. But the necklace, that silver locket, it was hers. He opened the box from her bedroom. Inside, a drawing of a tree, a sticker collection, and a missing locket, now on Abby's neck. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't imagination. It was her. Claire was alive. But the question remained. Did she know who she was? The next morning he returned to Miles. He was already playing. Richard sat in front of him. "I need to talk to your sister." Blinked. "Why?" Richard steadied his voice. "Because I think she's my daughter." The first time she saw the photo, something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, just a small fracture in the wall. Abigail Morgan sat on her fire escape, legs crossed under a blanket, sipping ginger tea. She liked that spot. It gave her a view of the low, and the occasional cat that wandered across the woods like they owned the city. She was humming, not singing, a lullaby. The same one she'd always known but couldn't quite. The one she used to sing to Miles when he had nightmares. The one her mother used to hum while folding laundry. And then her phone buzzed. It was a DM from Miles, no caption, just a photo, grainy, yellowed. A child on a carousel horse, blonde, blue dress. Red was something familiar about the girl's eyes, the way she tilted her head. Below it, a short message. Do you recognize her? Abby blinked. Something felt wrong. Like seeing your own handwriting in a letter you don't remember writing. She wrote back. Kinda looks like me when I was little. Miles responded immediately. That's what I thought, too. Then a second message. He says that's his daughter, Claire, and he says, you might be her. For a long time, Abby didn't respond. She just stared at the photo, and then at the locket around her neck. She opened it, a faded, almost erased engraving. Always come home. She'd never known what it meant. Her mother, Celeste, said she'd bought it at a flea market, that it was old, that it was just a charm. But something about that line. It didn't feel like a charm. It felt like a message. Abby hadn't spoken about her mother in years. Celeste Morgan had died when Abby was 13. Sudden stroke. No warnings. 1 minute she was laughing at the kitchen table. The next, she was collapsed on the floor. She never got to ask her the questions that haunted her through adulthood. Why did we move so much when I was little? Why don't we have baby pictures of me before age 6? Why can't I remember anything from before South Carolina? She asked Miles once. He didn't know either, just that they moved to Jacksonville and 2000, then Savannah, then settled back in Charleston. All Abby remembered from her earliest years was music, a woman's voice singing, a melody that made her feel, a deep laugh behind it, a pair of arms lifting her up into the air. But the face, she couldn't see it. The next morning she met Richard. Miles arranged it in the park. She approached cautiously. He stood slowly from the bench. His eyes were red. She extended her hand. Hi, I'm Abby. He didn't shake it. Instead, he looked at her deeply, searching her face, as if memorizing every line. And then, gently, he whispered, Hi, Claire. She froze. They sat. The park was quieter than usual. Even the birds seemed hesitant. Richard explained everything, the disappearance, the song, the photo, the locket. She listened without interruption. Every word hit like distant thunder. I'm not saying I'm sure, he said, but I've looked at that carousel photo for 5 years, and when I saw your face, I stopped breathing. Abby felt her chest tighten. She didn't want to believe him, but she couldn't deny the feeling. Something inside her was unlocking. Like a box with a broken lock, suddenly creaking open. She agreed to a DNA test. Miles found a lab. 7 days. During those 7 days, things started to unravel. She found an old box in Celeste's attic. She hadn't been up there in years. Inside, a baby dress, butterflies, faded yellow, with a tag inside, property of Charleston Children's Hospital, and a hospital bracelet. It read, Callahan, Claire E. 04-23-94. Her birthday was listed as 04-23-95, but this bracelet said 1994, 1 year earlier. 1 year she couldn't account for. She confronted Miles. He was stunned. I swear I didn't know. Mom never said anything. Abby nodded. She believed him. But that night, she had the first dream. She was walking through a park, sunlight, children laughing, and then music, a balloon. She turned, red, and a man's voice. Claire, wait! She woke up crying. Meanwhile, Richard dove deeper. He visited the home where Celeste had once worked. The family was gone. But an elderly neighbor remembered her. Said Celeste was quiet, kept to herself. Odd woman, always staring at the park? He asked. The neighbor shrugged. Said she saw something once, something she wasn't supposed to see. Back at home, Richard reopened old files. There was a security cam frame from a store down the block, time-stamped 3:14 p.m., blurry, but clear enough. A woman holding a child, walking quickly. Turning the corner, the child had blonde hair. The woman? Could. But it had never been confirmed. Now, Richard was certain. He visited the police again. Detective Carla Medina had retired, but she agreed to meet him. She had once promised, "If she's out there, I'll help bring her back." Now, over black coffee, she reviewed the files. After an hour, she looked at him. "If your hunch is right, it's the first real lead we've had in decades." They reopened the case unofficially. No public announcement, no press, just two people chasing a ghost. But Richard didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in her. Meanwhile, Abby's memories were returning, not in full, but fragments. A blue wall with stars, a stuffed rabbit, a deep voice reading her bedtime stories. One night she asked Miles, "Do you remember when we first met?" He frowned. "We were kids. You were 5. I was 3. "Do you remember what I said?" She hesitated. "I think I told you my name wasn't Abby." The test results came in on a Thursday. Miles opened the email, stared at the screen, then called her. When she arrived, he handed her his phone. She read the words 3 times. 99.997% probability of paternal match. Father, Richard Callahan. Her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, and for the first time in her life, she remembered her real name. The truth didn't feel like truth. It felt like betrayal. Abby hadn't spoken to Richard since the DNA results came in, not because she didn't believe them, but because now the question wasn't, "Is he my father?" It was, "Who was the woman who raised me?" Miles noticed the shift. She stopped humming, stopped smiling, stopped calling Celeste Mom out loud. She returned to the attic. This time she brought gloves and a flashlight. Beneath loose floorboards, she found another box, unlabeled, locked, but old, and under it a key. Inside, newspaper clippings from 1999. A police sketch of Claire Callahan, a single photograph, Claire on a swing, and a journal, Celeste's handwriting. The first page read, "For Abigail, someday when I can't explain it myself." Richard sat across from Detective Carla Medina, journal open between them. He didn't speak. She read in silence, her finger tracing each line. Then she looked up. She lied to everyone, including herself. According to the journal, Celeste had a breakdown after her sister died. She was alone, single, grieving, no children, no family, no job. In her words, "I wanted someone to love, someone who wouldn't leave." She had been watching Claire and her family for weeks. She worked next door, saw the child often, knew their routines. She didn't plan to take her. Claire ran toward the balloon cart, alone. Celeste saw the moment, the gap, the window. She wrote, she was crying. No one saw. I picked her up to comfort her. I didn't mean to walk away. I just didn't stop. Richard stared at the page. She says she didn't mean to, but she never came forward, not even after all those years. Carla nodded. She justified it to herself. She convinced herself the girl had been abandoned or lost. Meanwhile, Abby was unraveling. The lies were everywhere. Her birth certificate was forged. Her school records altered. Her medical records started at age. She called the hospital listed on the baby bracelet. No record of an Abigail Morgan, but Claire Callahan, admitted April 1994, released with parents. Her real birthday was 1 year earlier than she'd always believed. She visited the park again, stood by the same balloon cart, closed her eyes, and remembered. Not just the dream, the voice. "Claire, wait!" Her father's voice. And then the arms, lifting her. Different voice, higher, softer. "I've got you now." Richard received a call from Carla the next day. There's more. She had tracked down a retired officer, Detective Ronald Bixby. He worked the Callahan case briefly, but was reassigned a week after the disappearance. Richard remembered him, kind, methodical, but gone, too. Carla met him at his home. He remembered something odd. A woman matching Celeste's description had come forward a week after the case went cold, not to confess, but to ask about abandoned children cases. Weba, she claimed to be researching child development trauma, wanted access to files. Bixby denied her, but said she seemed nervous, paranoid. He filed a note. It was buried. No one followed up. The next day, Carla received a voicemail from Abby. 3 words, "I remember everything." She came to Richard's apartment alone, held the locket in her palm. "I used to dream of this," she said. "This hallway, this door." She stepped in slowly, looked around, every part of her body tense. Then, in a whisper, "Where's the rabbit?" Richard froze. He opened a box from the closet, pulled out a stuffed rabbit, worn gray, with one torn ear. Abby gasped. Tears formed instantly. "I used to sleep with it." They sat for hours. She told him about Celeste, her kindness, her silence, her rules. "She never told me not to ask, but she always changed the subject." Richard nodded. "She didn't want to lose you." Abby looked down. "She never should have had me to begin with." He reached for her hand. "She didn't have you. She took you, and I never stopped looking." But then came the second twist. Abby asked to read the rest of the journal. Richard hesitated, but handed it over. She took it home, read all night, and found a second note, tucked between pages. Different handwriting, short, sharp. "She doesn't know. She never knew. Don't tell her the truth." She recognized the handwriting. It was her mother's best friend, Janice. Janice had watched Abby often, sometimes stayed over when Celeste was away. Abby always thought of her as Aunt Jan. The note wasn't dated, but the ink was newer than the journal, which meant someone else knew and had helped hide the truth. Abby drove to Janice's house, confronted her. Janice didn't deny it, but her words sent a new chill down Abby's spine. "Celeste didn't take you because she was lonely." Abby blinked. "What?" Janice sighed. "She took you because she was afraid of your real father." Abby stepped back. "You mean Richard?" Janice shook her head. "No, I mean your biological father." Janice didn't flinch when Abby stood up. "You're lying." Janice looked at her, quiet but steady. "I wish I was." It didn't make sense. Richard was her father. The DNA test proved that. "Right?" Janice explained slowly. "Celeste was your aunt." Abby blinked. "What?" "She was your mother's sister." That part Abby knew vaguely. Celeste had mentioned a sister once, but never in detail. She'd assumed she died young. Janice shook her head. "No, sweetie, she didn't die. She disappeared, and no one wanted to look for her." Abby's biological mother, Rebecca Callahan, had vanished from the family after getting pregnant at 17. The family wanted to hide the scandal. The father? Unknown. Rebecca refused to name him, said he was dangerous, said she had to run, and she did. She cut off contact with everyone, except one person, Celeste. Celeste was 20 at the time. When Rebecca gave birth, she called her once. Told her she named the baby Claire, and that she was scared. 2 months later, Rebecca was found dead in a motel room in Atlanta. Overdose. Officially ruled as suicide. No baby was found. That's because Celeste had already gone to get her. "She didn't steal you from the park," Janice said. "She was bringing you home." Abby sat in stunned silence. But why the fake name? Why the lie? Janice hesitated. "Because of him." "Who?" "Your biological father." His name was never spoken in the family again, but Janice remembered him. Older, controlling. Known in the community. Well respected. Too respected. He was married. Had power. If the truth came out, it would have destroyed him, and he would have destroyed Rebecca. Celeste feared he'd do the same to Claire. So she changed your name, moved cities, built a new life. Abby felt sick. So many lies, so many people who knew and said nothing. But still, none of it explained the DNA test. Richard was the match. She drove to Carla Medina, told her everything. Carla nodded slowly. Then we need to test again. This time, compare DNA between you and both men. A second test was arranged. Richard agreed reluctantly. He looked confused. But he said something that Abby never forgot. No matter what the result says, you're still my daughter. I've waited too long to see you again to let some paper change that. The second test came back 10 days later. Result, paternal match, 99.99%. Richard Callahan, confirmed biological. The shock hit Abby like a wave. Janice had said Rebecca claimed the father was dangerous, controlling, too powerful. But what if she'd been talking about Richard? What if everything she'd been told was upside down? Abby confronted him. He didn't deny it. But what he said shattered everything. Yes, Rebecca was my student. He paused. I was 28. She was 17. Silence. It was a mistake. One I never stopped paying for. He said it started with tutoring. She was brilliant, lonely, unstable. Then he thought he was helping her. She thought she was in love. When she got pregnant, she vanished. He never knew, not until she was gone, and the baby with her. Celeste never told him. The family erased it. When Claire disappeared in 1999, he had no idea she was her. Not until the melody, not until the photo, not until her. Abby collapsed onto the bench. Everything she knew, her identity, her family, her history, was a lie wrapped in another lie. She wasn't just a missing child. She was the child of a man who lost her twice. Celeste had raised her with love, but also with fear. Fear of what might happen if the truth came out. Fear that Richard might find her. Fear that Abby would grow up in a world she believed unsafe. But Richard wasn't a monster. He was a man who made a terrible mistake and never got the chance to make it right. Abby walked into the ocean that night, not to disappear, just to feel something real, the cold, the salt, the weight. And as the waves pulled at her dress, she remembered the lullaby again. But this time, she remembered the whole thing, every line, every word, every moment, and she sang to her, to the stars, to the little girl she used to be. That weekend she returned to Richard. They didn't talk, just sat on the bench, watched the carousel. He handed her something, a music box. It played the lullaby, the original. She opened it. Inside, folded gently, a drawing. A girl, a man, a swing, and a single line scrawled beneath it, "Don't forget me." She wept. So did he. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was healing. Abby moved in with Richard. Temporarily, she said, but the boxes never came, and the lease on her apartment quietly expired. They started small, breakfast together, books left open, coffee brewed early. The lullaby played low in the background. She didn't call him Dad, not yet, but she didn't avoid his name either. Richard tried not to ask too much. He let her set the pace, but one afternoon, while organizing the bookshelf, she looked up and said, "What would you have done differently?" He paused, then said quietly, "Everything except loving you." She started calling him on her way home from work, at first to tell him where she was, then to ask about dinner, then just to hear his voice. They visited Rebecca's grave together. She hadn't been buried. No one claimed her body. She was cremated and placed in a shared memorial wall in Atlanta. Richard brought a single white rose. Abby left a folded piece of paper. On it she wrote, "I wish you could see me now. I'm still yours and his." Carla Medina came out of retirement to close the case. Officially, the disappearance of Claire Evelyn Callahan was now marked as recovered, found alive. The headlines ran for a week. Interviews, podcasts, an upcoming documentary. But Abby declined all of them. This wasn't a story to be sold. It was a life being rebuilt. Miles wrote a song about it, not the lullaby, a new one. It ended with a single whispered phrase, "Do you hear the music?" One morning, Richard found her on the porch, barefoot, holding the rabbit from her childhood. He sat beside her. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "I have memories I don't want." "I do too." A pause. "But you don't have to carry them alone anymore." Later that day, she showed him something she'd never shared with anyone, a journal of her own, pages full of questions about identity, about forgiveness, about grief. One page stood out. It said, "How do you forgive someone who lied to protect you?" And below that, "How do you forgive someone who told the truth too late?" She asked him gently, "Do you forgive Celeste?" He closed his eyes. "Yes, not because she deserved it, but because I do." Then she asked something harder. "Do you forgive yourself?" He hesitated, and answered with trembling honesty, "I don't know how." That night they watched old home videos. Claire at 3 years old, singing, dancing, falling off a tricycle, and laughing so hard she hiccuped. Abby watched herself as a stranger, then paused the video and said, "I remember this day." It wasn't a dramatic memory, just a sunny afternoon, ice cream, sidewalk chalk, laughter. But it was real, and it was hers. She asked him, "Do you think I'm still her?" He smiled. "You were never not her?" Eventually she called Laura. The conversation was short, stilted, full of long pauses and deep breaths. Laura cried the whole time. They agreed to meet. When they did, Abby wore the butterfly dress. It barely fit. But it felt like a circle closing. Laura opened the door slowly, then covered her mouth, then whispered, "My baby." They held each other for a long time, said nothing, just breathed. Later they walked the park, the same path, the same bench, the same balloon vendor. Laura whispered, "I looked away for 1 second, 1 second." Abby squeezed her hand. "You were always looking for me. That counts." At home, Richard lit a candle on the windowsill, the same place he had once placed missing posters. The candle flickered in the night breeze, and beside it he placed a small plaque. It read, "Claire Evelyn Callahan, found." Abby wrote a letter. Not for the press. Not for the police, just for herself. She folded it, placed it inside the music box, next to the drawing. It read, "To the girl who disappeared, I missed you, but I found you, and you're safe now." She started humming again, then singing, then performing. Small cafes at first, then bigger venues. One night she opened with a lullaby, told the story behind it, and the crowd fell silent. At the end, someone asked her, "Do you believe in miracles?" She smiled. "No, who don't give up." On a quiet Sunday, she came up behind Richard in the kitchen, wrapped her arms around him. He turned, surprised. She looked up at him and said, "Hi, Dad." And for the first time in 25 years, he cried without holding back. It had been 1 year since the song, 1 year since the bench, 1 year since Richard heard the lullaby again. He still sat on the same bench on Saturdays. But now it was different. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was remembering. Abby came with him sometimes. She brought coffee, black for him, chai for her. They watched the carousel together. Children laughed. Parents called names. The balloon vendor still wore the same crooked smile. Sometimes Richard flinched when a little girl ran ahead of her mother, but not always. Some scars learn how to heal in sunlight. One day she asked, "Why did you always sit here?" He looked out toward the square. "I thought if I stayed still she might find her way back." A beat. And in the end, the press had long since moved on, but every so often someone would stop them. Were you the ones?" They'd smile, nod, keep walking. Some stories don't need retelling, just living. Laura came often now. The relationship was delicate, like old lace. Beautiful, but easy to tear. They didn't speak of the losters, only of the one. They planted a tree together. In the yard behind Richard's building, a white oak, Abby hung the locket on one of its lowest branches. Let the wind decide its rhythm. Miles recorded his first album. He called it Found. The cover was a sketch Abby drew, a rabbit, a swing, a girl with a red balloon. One autumn evening, Abby sat alone with Carla Medina. They had dinner in a small Italian place. Carla looked older, tired, but at peace. "You did the impossible." Abby shook her head. "No, he did." In Mary, she meant Richard, but Carla smiled anyway. "You both did." Abby started volunteering at the children's library. She told stories, played songs. Once a little girl came up to her and asked, "Is that a real song or just made up?" Abby knelt. "It's real, but it was hidden for a long time." The girl tilted her head. "Like treasure?" Abby smiled. "Exactly like that." One night, Richard found a note on his pillow, in Abby's handwriting. It read, "Thank you for never giving up." Even when the world did. He sat with it in his hand for a long time, then folded it, placed it inside the music box, next to the drawing, next to the letter, next to everything that mattered. She came to him on his birthday, brought lemon ice, too tart, too cold. He laughed when he tasted it. "Still awful," he said. "But still yours," she replied. And that night, as they sat beneath the white oak, fireflies glowing in the dusk, she asked him something she hadn't dared ask before. "Do you ever regret that song?" He shook his head. "No, because it's what brought you back. And I think it's what kept me alive." She leaned her head on his shoulder. He closed his eyes, and the world for a moment was silent, not heavy, not dark, just silent, like a held breath, like the pause between notes. The bench was older now, faded, but strong. Abby carved something into the wood beneath. Small. Simple. She came home. In another city, far away, someone else heard the story. A woman who hadn't spoken to her sister in 20 years, a man who hadn't called his son since the divorce, a mother who had given up hope, a daughter who had stopped looking, and each of them picked up the phone. Because sometimes all it takes to believe again is a song you thought was lost. Before she walked away from the park one last time, Abby looked back at the carousel, spinning slowly, lights flickering, children waving. And she remembered her own laughter, the sound of her tiny feet on warm pavement, the feel of her father's hand lifting her into the air, the first note of a song that never left her. She whispered to the wind, "I came home," and then she smiled. And this time she wasn't lost.